Welcome to People Doing Good for Others. Welcome to People Doing Good for Others, where we honor and praise and celebrate those who are truly making significant differences in our communities. I'm Gary York, and I'm grateful to be your host today. My special guest is Lauren Greene. She's a cooperative extension agent here in Wilkesboro. She's in poultry science, and her scope of oversight is 38 counties. She has a background, some of it with Tyson Foods, and she's a graduate of North Carolina State, and this is going to be an exceptional day, and thank you again, and good morning.
Good morning, Gary.
Good to see you, friend.
Thank you for having me.
Spivey's Corner and Midway High School, just start with that if you will.
Yeah, so I grew up in Spivey's Corner. I went to Midway High School where I was very active in the FFA. And that's where I got my introduction to poultry, competing in poultry judging contests, and our community is very agriculturally based, and a lot of folks there raise poultry for a living, and so I was exposed to that from very early on.
You mentioned poultry judging.
Yes.
Can you expand on that a little bit? To give us an idea of this is what happens.
So the poultry judging contest with FFA, kids learn about poultry in general. They're required to take a test as part of the contest. And then they also have to judge birds. And so they do meat birds as well as egg layers, and actually handle those animals and see which birds are best suited to be a meat bird in the commercial industry and which ones are best suited to be an egg layer in the commercial industry. As well as grade eggs, just like a USDA grader would do before you get eggs in the grocery store. And they're also required to identify poultry parts, so different cuts that you buy in the grocery store, such as a breast or a leg.
Oh my goodness.
And so that is really a good introduction for high schoolers to poultry science.
Do you find some youngsters, say it's in ninth graders, that get involved and have had no farm experience at all, but really take off when they get there?
Yes, and I can say that for myself because I was the same way. I didn't grow up on a farm, but after being involved in FFA and poultry judging and things like that, I really drew an interest in it, and it took off from there. And we've been lucky enough, especially now that I'm on the extension side and help to facilitate these contests, that we're able to see kids that come back year after year, and some that maybe are now juniors in high school, that they come to the contest and they say, oh, I can't wait, to study poultry science, and maybe have never had experience with it before that. So.
Wow. Thank you for that, Lauren Greene. Who's Mr. Jolly?
Mr. Jolly was my FFA advisor, my agriculture teacher in high school. Through all 4 years of high school, he was a big influence on me and always pushed me to do my best, and like most high school teachers, is able to see where kids' interest lies and push them towards things that'll help them better develop those interests. So I'm very thankful for him and his guidance.
So you had a great mentor for 4 years.
Yes.
Wow. Then your interest in NC State and poultry science. Tell us about that.
So when I started school at NC State, I had the intention of going on to vet school. My granddaddy had been a vet for 55 years, and it was very prominent in the community, and I thought, oh, well, I'm going to go to school for that and come back and be in the community and be involved like he was. And I really enjoyed the classes and the things I was studying at State, but then during my first summer break, I came home and did an internship with a turkey company and was in the field with those growers all summer long and really got to understand what the growers were doing in the field, and my interest shifted. As much as I love animals, I really love helping others. And I felt like that I could make a bigger impact being in the field. And so that's where my interest in commercial poultry really started.
Expand on turkeys a little bit more about, are they primarily for Thanksgiving, or how does that work?
So in this area in Wilkes County, we mainly grow broilers, which are chickens used for meat. And down east, they raise chickens for meat. They also have table egg layers down there, that's common, as well as turkeys. And turkeys are primarily used for meat. Unlike chickens, when turkeys are hatched, they're separated into males and females and grown out in houses separately. So there will be a house of males and a house of females. And the reason for that is that most of your females go on to be packaged as whole birds for Thanksgiving. Whereas your males, once they are processed, they're packaged as lunch meat or turkey soup and things like that, further processed product, because they provide more meat, but it's not necessarily the size that the consumer demands for Thanksgiving.
So Lauren, an internship for folks that are watching us today, give us some idea about what does an intern, that opportunity you said was so important.
That opportunity was very important, and I was lucky to intern. It was Prestige Farms out of Clinton. I interned with them for 2 summers. But what their internship program looked like, and it is different for every company, but for them it was a 10-week program, and that company raises both turkeys and hogs. They're vertically integrated, so they start from the baby animals and the feed all the way to processing and packaging and marketing those products. And so I was lucky. My first summer, I was one of only 2 interns on the turkey side of the company. There was probably 15 or 20 that were on the hog side. And so I really got a lot of hands-on experience because I was one of the only ones who was able to do that summer.
They're just a random luck of the draw kind of that you would be there?
No, well, now Prestige has sponsored the Poultry Science Department at NC State, and it has been renamed the Prestige Department of Poultry Science. So I was lucky that the department has ties to that company. And then my family also had some ties with the owners of that company, just because that's in the community where I grew up, and we had known those folks for a while, and some of the extended family is part of my extended family. And so I was very lucky in that opportunity. But being in poultry science, the turkey side fit me better than going and working in the hogs. And so what my internship consisted of was working in the hatchery, to see how the birds are incubated and then hatched and then sent out to the farms. I worked with the breeder farms, which are the farms that provide the eggs for the hatchery. I worked in the field, and I spent most of that first summer, probably 8 weeks in the field in the grow out. And that's very interesting because it takes, whereas chickens, it takes about 7 to 8 weeks for a bird to
grow out.
Right, we call it grow out.
They come as just little bitties.
Yes, yeah. And in turkeys they're called poults. And in a turkey it takes about 20 weeks for a male to get full grown. So versus a chicken where it takes 7 or 8 weeks. And so I was really lucky that I got to see the whole process. Right. And I spent a good bit of time in the field going around and meeting growers and learning how they were operating their farms, what was important to them. And I spent some time in the plant as well, and it takes a special person to work in the plant, and that was not necessarily where my interest lied, but it was a very good opportunity for me to be able to see that.
You mentioned USDA, the role that it plays in the local community.
Yes, so USDA is important when it comes to the food that we as an animal agriculture industry provide to the general public. The USDA is responsible for making sure that the food that's on the grocery store shelf is safe for you to eat, and that, say eggs for example, if you go and buy a carton of jumbo grade A eggs, that those eggs are actually a jumbo size and a grade A. And so USDA is very important. They are one of If the government shuts down, they are considered essential employees because without those graders in the plants, whether that be in an egg processing facility or in a meat processing facility, the plant cannot run. So it is required, say for the plant here in Wilkesboro, that a USDA inspector be on site at all times when the plant is operating in order for them to be able to label their products as having a USDA grade and then also being able to sell those products outside of the state of North Carolina.
Wow. What is an integrator?
So an integrator is a company that basically has their hand in every aspect of the process. So when I refer to an integrator, it's usually a vertical integrator. And what that means is that company is responsible for producing the feed, the chicks or the poults. They contract with growers to grow out the animals. And then they're also responsible for the processing and packaging, marketing of the product, which is a good thing for the grower because they are contracted with the company. They're responsible for raising those animals and that's it. They're not really responsible for producing their own feed. They're not responsible for making sure they have chicks that are coming to their farm. The company handles all of that. And they also don't have to worry about who's going to take my birds when it's time to process and package them. And so the company takes care of that too.
The time lapse, a grower, so we ride down the road and see a house. Just say if it's going to be for meat. Give us again, how long does it take? What will the farmer do during the day? Just give us an idea of how that works.
Well, for the time process, from the time they get their chicks to the time that they go to the processing plant, it varies by company depending on what their end goal is.
Okay.
But for most, it's about a 7 to 8 week process. Okay. From the time that the baby chicks arrive on the farm to the time they leave.
They're 2 days old, is that right? When they
about a day or 2 days old.
Wow.
And so when they get on the farm, it's very important that those houses be at the right temperature because chicks are very susceptible to fluctuations in temperature, and so those houses need to be warm. They need to have plenty of fresh feed out as well as fresh water. And so on a day-to-day basis, as far as the grower is concerned, they're responsible for making sure that the bird has feed and water at all times and that the environment is friendly for the bird, and so that it's at the temperature that it should be and that the air quality is where it should be so that the birds can grow as best as they can and live their best life for those 6 to 7 weeks.
Will a little day-old chick know to eat? I mean, would it find a...
They will. For chickens and birds in general, foraging and looking for their own food is an instinct. Whereas like you think of a cow, that calf's instinct is to go to their mom for food. With a bird, their instinct is to forage. And so with a large-scale commercial poultry producer, when they put the chicks in the house, they try to put them as close to the feed as possible. That way the chick has every opportunity from as soon as they arrive on that farm to get feed and get fresh water.
Is it a particular feed for the age of a small chick? Is the feed changing?
It does.
During the 8 weeks?
It does, and again, that varies by company. But there's usually 4, sometimes 5 different feeds that are fed over the course of a chicken's life. And most of that is due to the nutritional needs. You think of us as humans, babies require different nutritional needs than toddlers or even like a young child, and then us as adults, we have different nutritional needs. And so as these birds grow, they have different nutritional needs and require different feeds as well.
All right, Lauren, let's go to, you were with Tyson here.
Yes.
What did you do?
So when I worked with Tyson here in Wilkesboro, I was a broiler field service tech. And so that's a lot of words for a job that's not that complicated. It was my job to go out and visit farms. I had anywhere from 20 to 25 farms at a time, and I was required to visit them each at least once a week. The ones that have birds, to make sure that the birds were healthy and that the grower was taking as best care of them as they could, that their environment was the way it should be, that their feed and water was being properly provided. And then the ones who may be out of birds at that time, that they were properly prepping their houses to get birds back.
Wow.
So
they clean the houses, sanitize them, have them contaminant free then when the new birds come?
Yes.
All right, now I want you to share with us, Lauren Greene, about this new career and what you'll be doing for the Cooperative Extension.
So I've been with Cooperative Extension for about a year, a little over a year now, and my job is broad but narrow. I'm responsible for everything in the western side of the state that has feathers and lays an egg.
Right.
So that is broad, but it's also narrow in that it's all birds and all poultry. But I really deal with anything. I work with commercial integrators. I work with what we call small flock or backyard producers. So
stop right there. Backyard.
Yes.
Let's expand on that.
So a backyard producer can be anything from, my neighbor who has 5 hens for the sake of having eggs for their family, to someone who's maybe has 2,000 birds on their farm and they're producing enough eggs to supply a local restaurant or grocery store, but they're not contracted with one of these integrators, so they are considered a small flock producer. So really,
you've just really enlightened me. I had no idea that would go on. So
it is
supplying a restaurant.
Yes, and I get a lot of questions about that. People call and they say, I would love to start raising chickens so that I can supply eggs to the local restaurant, because the local foods thing is really taking off right now. People want to know where their food is coming from, and that it has been locally sourced and isn't from, California, so to speak. Not that there's anything wrong with eggs from California, but they're more interested in what's coming from their community. And people are really taking advantage of that niche market. So,
Lauren Greene, we spoke of feed.
Yes.
And we spoke of railroads and storage and trucks. Share with us the essence of that. You talked about the big plant in Roaring River and how that works a little bit, if you will.
So when a company goes to build a feed mill, there are several things they're looking for. One of the first things is access to a railroad, because for most feed mills, they get their grain, whether that be corn or soybeans, from the railroad. They have it shipped in and transported in on the railroad. And so the mill in Roaring River is kind of prime example for that. They're right on those railroads. And they're lucky too, they also have natural gas. That's another thing that folks usually look for, is what kind of fuel can be provided to supply their boilers and things like that to help the feed mill run.
One of the education moments for me as we're together is about the immediacy of an answer. When a person calls you, they need to know now. Tell us about that. Yes,
so I get all kinds of questions, but yes, for the most part, when someone calls me, they need an answer right then. As far as a commercial producer goes, most of the time when they have a question, they're going to call someone within their company. But if that company contacts me with a question, then it is because they've exhausted all resources, and they have a lot of resources. So when they come to me, they do need an immediate answer. When some of these small flock growers call me, I get calls all the time for they want information on how to raise chickens, or what they should be feeding their birds, or how they should be housing them. Then I also get calls about, my favorite pet hen is coughing and I need to know what kind of medicine to give her. But they need an immediate answer.
Right.
Because if I don't get back to them right away, then that bird may not make it. So yes, it is very important to get immediate answers to people when they need it. And we're very thankful in Cooperative Extension that is a main focus of our Yes, that is a main focus of our group as a whole, as a state cooperative extension, is that they're very focused on community service and making sure that we are providing our customers and the community with the services that they need.
The scope of Tyson here, there were a couple numbers you shared with me. Tell us about 25 and 200.
So when I left, which that's been about a year ago, they had a little over 200 farms, and like I said, when I was in the field, I was responsible for 20 to 25 of those at any given time. And so if you break that down, then there were anywhere from 7 to 10 people doing my job at one time, just so those farms could be divided up evenly amongst all of us.
And tomorrow you will be in a conference, a demonstration, I think. Tell us about where you will be and what will happen there.
So like you said before, I cover a very large area. I cover 32 counties in western North Carolina, and there are several commercial integrators that are in that area, not just Tyson and Wilkesboro, although they are the largest. And so tomorrow I'm going to be in Statesville, and Iredell County is one of my counties, providing some further education for the employees and the field personnel for Purdue down there. And so I'll be working directly with some folks from the university, as well as some folks from the industry, to provide that education for them.
So you're going to be in a training day for employees of Purdue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And where will you do that? In Statesville at a conference room, or?
We'll do it at their office there in Statesville. So they have an office in Statesville, Purdue does, and so we'll be based in their office for the majority of the day.
Individuals will be there for that?
There should be about 20 between the Purdue personnel and then the few of us that'll be there from the university.
Now, Lauren Greene, I want you to really get into this contamination or disease, or how important it is. You were instructed not to be around birds for 3 days prior to doing. Give us an overview of how important it is to control or to make sure we don't bring disease in with us.
Yes, that is very important. And
is that biosecurity?
It
is that
is.
the word? All right, let's go there and really get into this.
All right. When I talked to you about it, we were talking about how part of my job is going to county fairs and judging chicken shows and stuff like that. So I did that last night in Rowan County. That was my 4th fair in a little less than 3 weeks. So that was a lot of fun. But now that I was around birds yesterday afternoon, before I'm around other birds or go to a farm, then I need to have been away from those from 48 to 72 hours. And most of the time, if I'm going to be with commercial folks, then I ask them. So we've been requested for tomorrow, for example, to have a 48-hour window. It's very important to make sure you don't cross-contaminate, because there's nothing more threatening to the poultry community than disease, because it doesn't take much to really lose a lot of birds. And so as far as biosecurity is concerned, when I think of implementing biosecurity now with extension, in my previous job it was a little bit different, but now if I've been on a farm, then I wash my vehicle when I leave. And before I do, because you never know what's on your car, or what feathers or something clung to your car that you may carry somewhere else. And so when I leave, I go through the car wash. And then if I were to go on another farm again after that, or in a couple of days, I would go through the car wash before going. You can never be too careful. And we also try and teach our producers, whether that be small flock people or commercial people, to have a set of farm-only footwear. And so those shoes only stay on the farm. They don't go to Tractor Supply, they don't go to Lowe's, they don't go to church on Sundays. Those shoes stay on the farm. And the reason for that is if they don't leave the farm, then they can't pick up contaminants from somewhere else. And, even especially for commercial poultry, because there's so many on a farm at one time, so many birds, I like to tell folks that if you have to go, say you have to go to the dentist, don't wear your farm clothes to the dentist, change clothes, and when you get back from the dentist, if you need to go to your farm, then change clothes and go, because you can never be too careful. For example, say you and I were sitting in a restaurant right now. We would have no way of knowing that if a poultry producer had sat in these seats beforehand, and if they hadn't changed clothes, then they may have brought something from their farm and is now in this seat. And I'm sitting in the seat, and if I go somewhere after this, then I've taken that with me. And so it's very important to be aware of where you've been. And, you know, I like to tell folks too, especially small flock producers, because they think, oh, well, I'm on a smaller scale, this doesn't really apply to me. But it applies to them, I think, more than it does a commercial producer, because commercial producers are very aware, they have a more overhead, they have more birds to worry about. But I'd like to tell folks, if you're having to go to Tractor Supply and pick up a bag of feed for your 10 hens that you have in your backyard, how likely is it that someone else has had to go to Tractor Supply to pick up feed for their hens and has been there? And so that's where we really encourage the farm-only footwear, disinfecting that footwear, and then changing your clothes if you've been out and about, just to prevent contamination.
Some 20 years ago, I was invited for a half-a-day tour, and I was amazed at what I was required to put on when there were small chicks coming, and we went through every process, even to the processing about noon. And what an incredible experience. I'll never forget having to put on like a gown and over my shoes and my hands and my hat, my hair. So that's what we're. You spoke of poultry science, as talked about feed and breeders and hatchers. Go through those 5 steps again with the integrated company, if you will.
Okay, well, with the integrators, it really starts, I think, with the feed mill. And so it's the feed mill's responsibility to feed every bird in the field, whether that be a breeder or a meat bird or a layer if you're breeding layer birds. And so the feed mill is very important, and so are all the people that work there, the truck drivers, the freight drivers who are bringing in ingredients for feed, the railroad operators who are bringing in those cars of grain and things like that, as well as the people working in the mill making the feed and loading the trucks and things like that. And then from there, you know, it goes to the farm, and for instance, for Tyson, it would be a breeder farm if we really start at the beginning. And those birds come from a grandparent flock, and so this is what we call parent stock in the industry. And those birds are what breed and produce eggs that then go to the hatchery. And for a chicken, it takes 21 days from the time the egg is laid to the time the chick is hatched. And so that hatchery is where all that magic happens for 21 days. Yeah. Temperatures are very important, humidity levels are very important. And then once the chicks are hatched, you have folks in the hatchery. Depending on the size of the hatchery, you may have anywhere from 20 to 40 people working there. It just depends on the size of the hatchery. And those birds are sorted out and put in crates and taken to the farm. And so you think about all the folks working in the hatchery. Then you have truck drivers who are taking the birds to the farm. So that's another 6 or 8 people right there that you have to think about. Then you get to the grow out farm and you have the grower. And most of the time it's not just that grower. It's also, you know, maybe 2 or 3 family members, or maybe they have hired help. They have 2 or 3 people who work on their farm. And so that's 5 or 6 people there. And then those growers work, you know, day to day, 6 to 7 weeks.
The management part of it is very important.
It is. It is very important, because if you are not on top of your game, you know, and then your birds are not going to.
The bottom line for a grower is how he manages that process from the time they get there, they leave.
Yes. Yeah. I like to tell people, control what you can control. You know, as far as the grower goes, they can't control the feed mill, they can't control the hatchery, but they can control everything that happens on their farm. And so if they do their best to manage everything on that farm to the best of their ability, then that'll help them in the long run.
Lauren Greene, this has been a wonderful day. I'm so grateful I feel like I have grown 3 or 4 times in what I know about what you do. And I want to thank River Street, and I want to thank Wilkes Communications and WIFM, and particularly you. So end with your gratitude for being where you are today with the poultry industry.
I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful to be where I am. And I like to think back of, as we were talking in the beginning, where I started in high school and with poultry judging. If I had never gotten involved in that, would I be here today? I don't know. And so I'm very thankful for all the things in the past 10 to 15 years that have led me to be where I am today with Cooperative Extension and helping the people of North Carolina.
Thank you for sharing your experience and your hope, and you're just a vital part of the success of this industry, and I'm so grateful you'd come and share with us today, and I hope you do it again.
Thank you.
Lauren Greene, thank you.